Good evening, and welcome back to SleepWise, a quiet place where you can learn softly and sleep deeply. Tonight, we drift into a gentler kind of curiosity, the kind that doesn't ask you to perform or improve or solve anything. It only asks you to notice. The room is dim. A small light pools on the edge of a page, and beyond it, the world has gone soft and indistinct, like a shoreline in fog. If it feels good, let your shoulders loosen and allow one slow breath to arrive, in and out, unhurried. Imagine a book resting nearby, not as an assignment, but as company. Its ideas come quietly, like footsteps in a hallway that never startle you awake. This story is inspired by Daniel Kahneman, a psychologist who spent decades studying how human beings make sense of life and how we choose, judge, and decide. But we don't need the history first. We begin where you already live, inside ordinary moments. Notice how quickly your mind can move. A face looks familiar before you remember a name. A question is answered before you hear yourself speak. You step around a puddle without planning it, and sometimes a small worry rises, sharp and immediate, without being invited. As you picture these moments, let your jaw soften and take another easy breath, as though you're setting something down. That quickness isn't a flaw. It's an old talent, a mental reflex that helps you glide through the world without stopping at every doorway. Much of the time it keeps you safe, keeps you efficient, keeps you moving. It is the mind's fast current, carrying you forward with hardly any effort. And then there is another pace, slower, heavier in a gentle way. The pace you feel when you hold a number in mind long enough to dial it, or when you trace a careful thought to its end, or when you weigh two choices and realize there isn't an easy answer waiting. You can feel attention working, and you might let your breath lengthen by a second, like a candle flame settling. Fast thinking is like a blink. Slow thinking is like a long exhale. As you settle into bed, it can be soothing to remember that both speeds belong to you. One is not wiser, and the other not foolish. They are simply different tools, built for different moments. And when we don't notice which one is steering, we can drift into quick stories that feel true simply because they arrive smoothly. So tonight, we'll take a quiet walk through the mind's two rhythms. We'll tell small stories and pause often, letting the explanations rest lightly in your hands. You don't have to memorize anything. You don't have to fix anything. If your thoughts wander, that's perfectly fine. Simply return, as you would return to the sound of rain. And with each return, allow your body to sink a little deeper into comfort, breathing in calm and breathing out the day as the page turns itself, one gentle moment at a time. The book does not ask you to choose between these two rhythms. It only invites you to notice them, the way you might notice two kinds of wind. One is quick and playful, moving leaves in an instant. The other is steady and slow, bending the branches almost imperceptibly. In Kahneman's work, these two rhythms are sometimes described as two systems of thought. But tonight, we can keep it simpler. You can think of them as two ways your mind travels. One way is automatic, fast, and fluent. The other is deliberate, slower, and more effortful, like walking with a lantern instead of gliding on moonlight. The fast current is the mind that recognizes a smile, senses tension in a voice, finishes a familiar phrase, reads the mood of a room. It's the mind that catches a ball before you've had time to explain how you did it. It keeps your life moving with surprising grace. And the slower rhythm, that is the mind that does arithmetic step by step, that reads something carefully when it matters, that checks your first impression and asks quietly, is that really true? It's the part of you that can hold back a reflex long enough to choose a different response. You might even feel the difference in your breathing. When the mind is in its fast current, breath can become a little shorter without you noticing. When the mind eases into the slower rhythm, breath often deepens on its own. So if it feels natural, let one breath drift a little lower now. Not forced, not counted, just a gentle reminder to make room. There's something comforting here. The fast mind is not your enemy. It is not a bad habit you must defeat. It is a helper, ancient, practical, often brilliant, and the slow mind is not always noble or pure. It can be tired, it can be distracted, it can get stuck. Both are human. Kahneman noticed that the fast current is always present, always offering suggestions. Little answers, little stories, little feelings of certainty. The slow rhythm is more like a visitor you can invite in. It arrives when you need it, and it asks for energy, attention, patience. And this is where many of life's small misunderstandings begin. Not because we are foolish, but because we are busy. We let the fast current steer, even in moments when the slower rhythm would have chosen a calmer route. Tonight, though, you are not navigating traffic or meetings or messages. Tonight, you are in a quieter place. You can let the fast current slow down simply because there is nothing chasing you. The world can wait. As you listen, imagine you are standing at the edge of a gentle river. One stream runs swift and bright. The other moves slower, deeper, almost silent. You don't need to step in yet. Just watch them for a moment, and as you watch, let your shoulders soften again, and allow your breath to move like water, easy, steady, and unbothered. There is a simple way to meet the fast current of the mind. Give it something effortless to do, something it can answer immediately before you even realize you've asked. For instance, picture a warm cup in your hands. You don't need to see every detail. You simply know what warmth feels like. You know the weight, the comforting heat traveling into your palms. You don't calculate it. You don't debate it. You just recognize it. That recognition is fast thinking. It is the mind as a pattern finder. It takes a small hint and completes the picture. Most of the time, this is a gift. Without it, every day would feel like walking through fog, needing to name and measure every step. But the same gift has a quiet habit. It loves to turn hints into certainty. A small clue becomes a full story. A single moment becomes a verdict. A glance becomes a conclusion. Kahneman spent years studying these swift conclusions, not to shame the mind, but to understand it, the way you might understand weather. If you know how wind behaves, you don't blame it for blowing. You simply choose where to place the candle. One gentle idea from his work is that the mind is always doing invisible work in the background, making guesses, filling gaps, smoothing rough edges, and trying to keep the world coherent. Coherence feels good. It feels like relief. A neat story gives the mind a place to rest. So, if you've ever felt the comfort of thinking, "I get it now," you already know what he meant. The mind prefers a story that flows, even when it is missing parts. To keep it bedtime soft, we can picture it like this. Your mind is a quiet narrator, and it hates unfinished sentences. When it hears the beginning, it wants to supply the ending. When it sees a few stars, it wants to draw the constellation. And when we are tired, when the day has been long, that narrator becomes even more eager. It wants things to be simple. It wants to close the loop. So let's practice a small softness. The next time a quick story forms about yourself, about someone else, about what something means, imagine holding it lightly as though it's a note written in pencil, not ink. You don't have to erase it. You don't have to argue with it. You can simply say, "That's one possibility," and let it rest on the table. As you do, take a slow, quiet breath and feel how that one breath creates space. Space for the mind to stop rushing. Space for the narrator to lower its voice. Tonight, we're not trying to become different people. We're simply learning the feeling of a pause, the small, gentle pause where the slower rhythm can appear like a lantern being lit in a dark room. There is another quiet doorway into these two rhythms, the feeling of effort. You may have noticed that some thoughts feel like they happen to you, and others feel like you are doing them. One kind arrives on its own, like a bird landing on a railing. The other kind requires a little lift of attention, like turning a heavy page. Kahneman described the slower rhythm as effortful because it asks for focus. And focus is a limited resource. You can sense it in your body. When you concentrate, your brow may tighten, your breathing may shallow, and your mind may narrow, like a beam of light. But when you stop concentrating, the beam widens again, the room returns, the breath returns. So if you feel yourself narrowing right now, you can let that beam soften and take a gentle breath that reminds you there is nothing to solve tonight. A helpful way to understand this is to imagine your attention as a small budget you carry through the day. You spend it when you learn something new, when you read carefully, when you plan, when you try not to make a mistake. If the day has demanded a lot of careful thinking, the budget runs low. And when the budget is low, the mind prefers the fast current. It chooses the easy path. It takes shortcuts. It leans on familiar answers, not because you are careless, but because your mind is trying to conserve energy. This is why, at the end of a long day, decisions can feel heavier, even small ones. What to eat, what to reply, what to postpone. The slow rhythm isn't gone. It's just tired. Kahneman also observed that the mind often confuses ease with truth. When something feels easy to think, it feels more believable. When words are simple, when a story is smooth, when an idea fits neatly, the mind relaxes into it, and that relaxation can feel like certainty. In the daytime, this can lead to quick judgments. At night, it can lead to worries that seem more convincing than they really are, simply because they repeat smoothly. So, here is a bedtime-friendly kindness. If a thought feels certain right now, it may simply be familiar, not necessarily accurate. Familiar. You don't have to wrestle it. You can let it drift by like a small boat on the river. And you can return to something simple. The rise and fall of breathing, the softness of the pillow, the quiet weight of the blanket. If you like, imagine your attention budget closing for the night, like a shopkeeper turning the sign to closed. No more spending, no more effort. The slow rhythm can rest. The fast current can quiet down too. And as you listen, you might notice that the most important thing is not choosing the right thought. It's allowing the mind to ungrip, one breath at a time, in and out, like a tide that knows exactly what to do without being told. Now, let's take a small walk into something Kahneman cared about deeply: the narrowness of attention. Imagine you're looking through a window at night. The glass frames a small part of the world: a street lamp, a quiet corner, a few drifting leaves. Everything outside the frame still exists, but you are not seeing it right now. Your mind does something similar all day long. It frames, it focuses, it chooses a slice of reality. This is useful. Without a frame, everything would arrive at once, loud and tangled. The mind would have no path through the noise. Attention gives you a path. But attention also hides what it does not include. And the mind, in its fast current, often treats the framed slice as the whole scene. What you see becomes what there is. The rest goes dim. Kahneman had a simple phrase for this tendency, one that feels almost like a lullaby in its honesty. When we have a little information, the mind still wants a complete story. It fills in the blank spaces without announcing it has done so. You can notice this in gentle ways. If you meet someone once, your mind forms an impression. If you hear one detail, your mind builds a whole picture around it. If you remember a moment, your mind turns it into a summary of the day. And again, this is not a moral failing. It is a design feature. The mind is trying to keep the world coherent because coherence is comforting. Tonight, though, we can loosen the frame. We can let the slice widen. We can allow uncertainty to be soft, not threatening. A simple bedtime practice is to replace the mind's sharp conclusion with a gentler sentence. Instead of, "That's how it is," you can whisper, "That's how it seems right now." Instead of, "I know what will happen," you can say, "I don't have to know tonight." As you try those sentences on, let a slow breath accompany them, like a quiet seal of permission. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to be in between. Kahneman's work is full of experiments and careful observations, but the heart of it can be held in one calm thought. The mind tells stories quickly, and sometimes those stories feel true because they are complete, not because they are correct. So tonight, as sleep approaches, we don't chase the stories. We don't demand that the mind stop speaking. We simply make the room warmer and quieter so the narrator lowers its voice. Imagine the frame of the window dissolving. The street lamp still glows, but now the darkness around it is spacious. The scene is larger than anyone thought, and you, lying here, can be larger too. Breathing softly, letting the mind's edges blur. As the world slows, and so do we. In the quiet of night, it can be comforting to notice how the mind leans toward what feels easy. Some ideas arrive smoothly, like a familiar song you don't have to learn again. They don't snag. They don't demand effort. They glide. And because they glide, they can feel trustworthy. Kahneman called this feeling cognitive ease, but you can sense it without the label. It's the gentle relief you feel when something is simple to understand, when a phrase sounds right, when a story has a clean ending. You can imagine your mind as a traveler who prefers well-lit paths. If the path is bright and easy, it assumes it's safe. If the path is dim and complicated, it hesitates, even if that dim path leads to the truer place. Ease becomes a quiet signal, and the mind reads it as approval. This is one reason repetition has such power. When you hear something often, it becomes easier to think. The words fit the tongue. The idea slips into place. And when it becomes easier to think, it can start to feel more true, even if nothing about its truth has changed. The mind relaxes, and that relaxation can be mistaken for certainty. Tonight, this is not a warning. It's a soft explanation, a way to be gentle with yourself. Because sometimes what repeats most often in the mind are worries. Old worries, familiar worries, the ones your mind can recite without opening the book. They feel right simply because they are well practiced. So here is a bedtime kindness. If a worry feels convincing right now, it may simply be familiar, smooth, easy to retrieve. Not necessarily accurate, just easy. Let that settle for a moment, like a pebble placed on the windowsill. And if it feels natural, allow one slow breath to arrive beneath it, in and out, unhurried. You don't have to push the worry away. You don't have to fix it. You can let it sit in the corner of the room while you warm the room with steadier things. Picture a small lantern beside the bed. The lantern doesn't chase shadows. It doesn't argue with them. It simply makes the space kind enough that the shadows stop feeling urgent. In the same way, the slower rhythm of your mind doesn't have to battle the fast current. It only needs a little light, a little patience, a little space. And space is often created by the simplest thing you can do. A gentle exhale that tells the body, we are safe enough to rest. If you notice yourself tightening, forehead, chest, hands, invite those places to soften by a fraction. Let the breath loosen them the way warm water loosens a knot. Tonight, we're practicing a quieter truth. Comfort and certainty are not the same thing. The mind may crave certainty, but the body craves safety, and safety can be built from small, steady signals. Slower breathing, a relaxed jaw, the simple permission to leave some questions unanswered. The day can keep its unfinished loops. The night does not require closure. It only asks for softness and for time. And time, here in the dark, is generous. Now, let's step into a small story, the kind your mind makes every day without asking permission. Imagine you're walking into a room where two people are speaking. You catch only fragments, one sentence, a tone, a pause that feels a little sharp, a laugh that lands strangely. The mind, almost instantly, begins to assemble a whole picture. What they mean, how they feel, what might happen next. Before you've even hung up your coat, your inner narrator has drafted a scene. This is the fast current at work. It takes thin threads and weaves them into fabric. It prefers a complete tapestry over scattered strands, and in most situations, that preference is useful. You can't stop and investigate every moment. You can't gather every detail. The mind fills in the blanks so you can move through life without freezing at every uncertainty. Kahneman noticed something important about this weaving. The mind is not only quick, it is also quietly confident in its quickness. It often doesn't announce, I'm guessing. It speaks as though it knows. And because it speaks smoothly, it can feel like knowledge. There is a gentle phrase from his work that captures it. The mind tends to treat what it has in front of it as if it is all that matters. The rest is simply not present. Not because it's false, but because it's unseen. And what is unseen rarely makes it into the story. Tonight, we can watch this habit without judgment, the way you might watch clouds reorganize themselves in moonlight. Think of a time you were sure you understood a situation, and later learned one small detail that changed everything. It wasn't that you were careless, it was that your mind did what minds do. It built the best story it could with the pieces available. So here is a soft practice you can hold like a warm cup. When your mind offers a quick story about someone's intentions, about what a silence meant, about what tomorrow will bring, try placing one word in front of it. Maybe, maybe that pause meant they were tired, not angry. Maybe that message was short because the day was long. Maybe the future is wider than the mind's first draft. You don't need to force this. Just let it exist as an option. And as you do, let your breathing become the quiet background music. In and out, like a slow tide that does not rush to complete the sentence. Because the slower rhythm, when it arrives, asks a different kind of question. It doesn't ask, "What is the story?" It asks, "What else might be true?" If it helps, imagine the narrator in your mind lowering its voice, not silenced, simply softer. The mind can still weave, but it doesn't need to pull the thread tight. It can leave space between the stitches, and sleep loves that space. Sleep arrives more easily when the mind stops insisting on neat endings and allows the world to remain a little unfinished. You are allowed to be unfinished tonight, too. Your body can rest, even while some stories remain unwritten. There is a subtle way the mind protects itself. It edits the world into something that makes sense. If you watch closely, you'll notice your mind doesn't like blanks. A blank is an open loop, and open loops feel restless. So the fast current fills them. It supplies missing motives, missing causes, missing endings. It does this quickly, like a skilled painter suggesting an entire landscape with a few strokes. A half-heard sentence becomes a full intention. A single expression becomes a whole mood. A small mistake becomes a verdict about who you are. In Kahneman's work, this shows up again and again. The mind is less like a camera and more like a storyteller. A camera records what is there. A storyteller arranges what is there and adds what is missing, so the story holds together. The storyteller prefers coherence because coherence is calming. A neat story gives the mind a place to rest. But sometimes the rest is borrowed too soon. Sometimes the mind settles into a story simply because it is complete, not because it is correct. Smoothness becomes proof. The closed door feels safer than the open one. You can see this in the sentences the mind likes most. Short, certain, final. That's how they are. This always happens. I knew it. The mind loves sentences that click shut. The slower rhythm, when invited, opens the door again. It asks gently, "What is the evidence?" It asks, "What else is possible?" It asks, "Is this a fact or a feeling that wants to become a fact?" This slower rhythm is not meant to run all day. It would exhaust you. It's meant to appear in the moments that matter, like a careful friend who joins the conversation only when the stakes rise. Tonight, we can invite it in quietly. We can do it without turning bedtime into a courtroom. No cross-examinations, no harsh logic, no pressure to be perfect. Just a soft loosening of certainty. Here is a small practice that fits the night. When a thought arrives with a hard edge, sharp, absolute, unkind, try softening one word. Turn always into often. Turn never into not lately. Turn I can't into it's hard. Turn they meant to into it seemed like. As you soften the words, let your breath soften too. In and out. Steady enough to feel the chest settle on the exhale. You're not trying to argue with your mind. You're simply giving it a warmer tone. Kahneman would say that the fast current is powerful, and it will keep offering tidy stories. But you are allowed to hold those stories lightly. You can set them down on the nightstand like a pen you don't need right now. And the beautiful thing is, the body understands this gesture. When the mind stops squeezing the story, the body often stops squeezing too. The shoulders drop. The stomach unclenches. The breath finds more room. Now we come to something quietly surprising. Even when we remember life well, we don't remember it evenly. Think about a day you've had, any day. You probably don't recall every minute with the same clarity. Certain moments rise brighter than the rest. A sharp comment, a sweet gesture, a small mistake, a sudden laugh. And often, the ending of the day carries extra weight, as though it stamps the whole experience with a final color. Kahneman noticed this pattern in the way people remembered events. The mind doesn't store life like a full recording. It stores highlights, and then it stores a conclusion. Later, when you ask, "How was it?" the mind answers using those pieces. It's as though memory gathers a bouquet and calls it the garden. This matters because the mind you live with during the day, the experiencing mind, often feels different than the mind that remembers, the remembering mind. The experiencing mind lives in real time, in taste, in sound, in the warmth of a mug, in the way light falls on a table. The remembering mind edits. It compresses. It makes a story. Neither is wrong. They simply do different jobs. The experiencing mind is a river. The remembering mind is a map. And maps are useful, but they are not the river. Tonight, this can be soothing because it means you don't have to treat every remembered feeling as a full report of reality. A memory is a summary. A memory is an opinion shaped by what stood out. Sometimes what stood out was loud, not important. Sometimes what stood out was recent, not representative. Sometimes it was intense, not enduring. So if the day feels heavy in retrospect, you might gently ask, what moments did my mind choose as peaks? And then without forcing anything, you can add one softer moment to the bouquet. The warmth of water on your hands, the quiet of an elevator ride, the relief of sitting down, the sound of your own breathing when the room finally went still. If it feels good, let one slow breath accompany that softer moment in and out, as though you are teaching the mind to remember comfort too. Kahneman's research often returns to this. Our minds are extraordinary and also selective. They don't just store facts, they store meaning. And meaning is shaped by peaks and endings, by intensity and conclusion. So tonight, we can offer ourselves a kinder ending, not with dramatic affirmations, but with something simpler, a slower pace, a softer light, a body that feels safe. Because the ending matters, and you are allowed to let the ending of your day be gentle, even if the middle was busy, even if some moments were hard. As you lie here, imagine the day closing like a book, not slammed shut, not thrown aside, but placed carefully on a shelf with a quiet, respectful hand. And as it settles, you can let your breathing settle too, steady, patient, and free. And now, in the hush between wakefulness and sleep, we meet two versions of you. One is the you who lived the day, the you who moved through conversations, choices, interruptions, small surprises. This is the experiencing self, present in real time, sensing life as it happens. The other is the you who tells the story of the day, the you who looks back and decides what it meant, what kind of day it was, whether you handled it well, what you should have done differently. This is the remembering self, and it is always trying to make sense. Kahneman suggested that these two selves can disagree. You might enjoy many quiet minutes during the day and still remember it as stressful because one sharp moment took center stage. Or you might endure something difficult that ends kindly and remember it as better than it felt while you were in it. The memory becomes a summary shaped by a few bright markers. This is not a flaw. It's the mind doing what it does, compressing the endless stream of experience into a story you can carry. A story is lighter than a river, but the remembering self has a habit that can keep us awake. It loves to evaluate. It keeps score. It replays. It searches for meaning the way a hand searches for a missing key. And sleep doesn't need a narrator. So tonight, it can be restful to step away from the remembering self for a little while, not to banish it, just to let it sit down. Imagine it placing its papers in a neat stack, closing the folder, and deciding for now not to review. For a moment, return to the experiencing self. Feel the bed supporting you. Feel the quiet weight of the blanket. Notice the temperature of the room, the faint sounds at a distance, the simple truth of breathing in and out, gentle and steady, as though the breath is a rocking chair that has rocked 1,000 people to sleep. If a thought comes, an evaluation, a replay, a sentence beginning with "I should have," let it pass like a subtitle on a screen. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to finish it. You can return to sensation the way you return to the sound of rain. And when you return, let the body sink a little deeper. Let the shoulders drop by a millimeter. Let the tongue rest in the mouth. Let the forehead smooth as though a hand has passed over it. This is a quiet skill, allowing the remembering self to pause while the experiencing self continues peacefully into the present moment. As we move forward, we'll keep learning how the mind becomes confident, how it misreads randomness, how it leans toward certain shortcuts, all without forcing anything. For now, simply breathe and let the story become softer at the edges. As the night grows wider and you grow heavier, and the world slowly, kindly lets you go, there is a feeling the mind loves almost as much as comfort, the feeling of being sure. Certainty can arrive like a warm blanket. It smooths the edge of uncertainty, quiets the internal debate, and lets the day move forward. When you think, I know, the body often relaxes a little, as though the world has become simpler. And that is exactly why certainty can be so persuasive. Kahneman noticed that confidence often appears before accuracy, not because people are careless, but because the fast current of the mind is designed to produce an answer quickly. It would rather give you a clean story than leave you standing in the doorway with questions. You can picture it like this. The fast mind is a generous friend who always has a suggestion. It points to one explanation, one motive, one outcome, and it speaks with a steady voice. The steadiness itself can be mistaken for truth, but steadiness is not the same as correctness. Sometimes it is only familiarity in disguise. We see this in ordinary moments. You read a headline and feel you understand the whole story. You hear a confident voice and assume it must be right. You remember a past experience and assume it predicts what will happen again. The mind turns a few pieces into a whole puzzle, and then it nods. The slower rhythm, when it arrives, is not here to humiliate the fast mind. It is here to ask one quiet question. How do I know? That question does not need to be sharp. It can be gentle, almost sleepy, like tracing a finger over the grain of a wooden table, feeling the truth of it without forcing it. Tonight, you might practice this softly. If a thought comes with a hard edge, this will go badly, or they meant that, or I can't handle it. Try adding a small cushion of doubt, not to make yourself anxious, but to make yourself free. You can whisper, I might be guessing, or I'm feeling certain, but I don't have to decide tonight. And then, without effort, let a slow breath follow, in and out, as though you're loosening a knot that didn't need to be so tight. The body understands uncertainty when it is offered kindly. It can hold it without panic. Kahneman's work reminds us that confidence can be manufactured inside the mind, not earned in the world. Sometimes it rises simply because the story is coherent, because the details fit neatly, because the mind prefers a smooth path. So tonight, We're learning to recognize the feeling of certainty as a feeling, not a command. And when you can see it that way, the mind becomes softer. The voice in your head grows less absolute. The room grows wider. There is more air. In this wider space, sleep has somewhere to land. It does not land on perfect answers. It lands on permission. The permission to be unfinished and to be calm anyway. Some nights, the mind feels like it is scanning for patterns, the way your eyes might scan the sky for familiar stars. We are pattern seekers. It's one of the mind's most beautiful talents. It helps us learn language, recognize faces, avoid danger, make sense of experience. The mind looks for regularities and connections because connections make the world livable. But there is a gentle trap hidden inside this talent. Sometimes we find patterns in places where there is only chance. Kahneman spent time studying how easily we mistake randomness for meaning. We see two events happen close together and assume one caused the other. We see a streak, good luck, bad luck, and assume it will continue. We look at a small set of examples and treat it as a rule. It's as though the mind, holding only a handful of pebbles, decides it knows the shape of the entire beach. This happens because small samples feel convincing. A few moments are easier to hold in memory than 100. A few stories are easier to recall than 1,000. The fast mind prefers what it can grasp easily, and then it treats that grasp as a full hold. But life is often noisier than our minds want it to be. The world has variation. It has swings. It has long stretches that say nothing at all, and sudden spikes that feel like messages. If you've ever watched raindrops on a window, you know this. Some drops merge and race down quickly. Others pause. Some look like they are choosing a path, but they are simply following tiny differences in the glass. The mind, watching, might tell a story anyway. Tonight, you can let this be comforting, because if your mind has been interpreting every fluctuation as a sign, every mood shift as a prophecy, every small mistake as a trend, you can relax a little. You don't have to make a meaning out of every ripple. The slower rhythm can help by asking, is this a real pattern, or is it just a few moments standing close together? That question is not meant to turn bedtime into a spreadsheet. It's meant to loosen the grip of anxious certainty. It's meant to remind you that a single day does not define a life, and a single feeling does not predict tomorrow. As you hear this, let your breath be the steady thing underneath the mind searching, in and out, slow enough to feel your shoulders soften, slow enough to feel the chest settle with the exhale. Kahneman would say that the mind dislikes randomness because randomness feels like a lack of control. But sleep is not control. Sleep is surrender, gentle and safe. So tonight, you can allow the world to be a little random, You can allow your thoughts to be a little messy. You can allow the story to remain unfinished. And in the quiet space where you stop forcing patterns, your body often finds a deeper rhythm, the one it has carried since the beginning. Breath, heartbeat, rest, the simple, dependable music that doesn't need an explanation. Some stories in science are not stories of lone geniuses, but of companionship. Two minds walking side by side, noticing what a single mind might miss. Kahneman's work is often remembered alongside the work of his close collaborator, Amos Tversky. You can imagine them not as distant names on a spine, but as two people at a table late in the day, papers spread out, coffee growing cold, ideas moving between them like quiet light. They were interested in a simple, tender question. Why do intelligent people make predictable mistakes? Not foolish mistakes, human ones. The kind you make when you are tired or rushed or too confident or simply trying to live a life that moves fast. They noticed that the mind uses shortcuts, not because the mind is lazy in a moral sense, but because the mind is economical. It tries to do a great deal with limited energy. It uses quick rules of thumb, small strategies that usually work well enough. The beauty is that these shortcuts are often helpful. They let you decide quickly. They let you navigate complexity. They let you function without pausing at every step. They are the mind's way of staying afloat in a sea of information. But the same shortcuts can mislead us in systematic ways. And this is what fascinated them. Not the occasional error, but the reliable pattern of error. The mind tends to tilt in certain directions, again and again, across people and cultures and contexts. When you know this, something soft happens. You stop treating every mistake as a personal failing. You begin to see mistakes as part of being human in a complicated world. It's like realizing that everyone walking through a windy street will squint. It's not a moral issue. It's simply what eyes do in wind. Tonight, it can be comforting to hold this idea close. If your mind has been replaying something you said, or doubting a decision, or judging your own judgment, you can let a little kindness enter the room. Yes, the mind can be mistaken. And yes, the mind can be brilliant. Both can be true in the same breath. In and out. Allow the breath to remind you that you don't have to be perfect to be safe. Kahneman and Tversky did not study these patterns to make people feel small. They studied them to make people feel seen. To say quietly, this is how minds work. You are not alone in it. So tonight, imagine that table again. Two friends, patient, curious, not rushed. Imagine their work as an invitation to treat your own mind the same way, with curiosity instead of criticism. As you lie here, you can be that friend to yourself. When a thought appears, you don't have to chase it. You can observe it. When a worry forms, you don't have to believe it. You can notice it. And in that noticing, the mind begins to slow. The fast current softens. The slower rhythm steps forward, not as a judge, but as a lantern, steady, warm, and calm enough for sleep. There is a particular kind of thought that has an easy time getting your attention, the vivid one. A single striking story can feel heavier than 1,000 quiet facts. A dramatic image can crowd out calmer realities. A rare event, once pictured clearly, can feel common, simply because it is easy to imagine. Kahneman and Tversky noticed this in the way we estimate risk and frequency. The mind often answers a difficult question by substituting an easier one. Instead of asking, "How likely is this?" it asks, "How easily can I picture this?" And what is easy to picture feels close. It feels present. It feels possible. Sometimes it even feels inevitable. You can see this in everyday life. You hear about an accident, and suddenly the world seems more dangerous. You remember one awkward moment, and suddenly you feel awkward as a person. You recall a single failure, and it grows into a forecast. The mind gives weight to what is available to memory, to imagination, to emotion. The fast current reaches for what it can grab quickly, and vivid stories are easy to grab. Tonight, this matters because the most vivid stories are not always the most accurate. Worry is often vivid. Regret is often vivid. Embarrassment is often vivid. The mind can replay them in high definition. But the quieter truths of your life, small kindnesses, ordinary competence, the 1,000 moments you handled without drama, those are often stored in a softer light. They don't shout, they hum. So here is a bedtime kindness. If a vivid thought shows up tonight, you can greet it the way you greet a loud guest. You don't have to throw it out. You don't have to invite it to stay. You can simply acknowledge you're loud and then turn back toward the quieter room. As you do, let your breath become your anchor in and out, steady, like the slow ticking of a clock in another room. The breath is not vivid. It is gentle. And that gentleness is exactly why it helps. You might even imagine dimming the brightness of the vivid thought, like lowering a screen's glow. You're not denying it. You're simply choosing not to stare. Kahneman would say that our minds are built for stories, and stories will keep arriving. But you can choose which ones deserve the main stage at night. Tonight, the main stage belongs to rest. So let the vivid stories sit in the balcony if they must. Let them be present without being central. Let the quieter truths return to the foreground. The softness of the pillow, the warmth of the blanket, the steady ease of breathing. In this gentle spotlight, the mind begins to lose interest in drama. The nervous system receives a simpler message. Nothing is required right now. No decisions, no rehearsals, no predictions. Just the slow, ordinary miracle of settling and settling and settling again. Now we arrive at something that sounds small, but changes a great deal. The frame, the same reality, can feel different depending on how it is presented. The same choice can seem inviting or frightening depending on the words that carry it. It's not because people are irrational in a cartoonish way. It's because the mind listens to language the way the body listens to temperature. Immediately, instinctively, before analysis has time to speak. Kahneman studied how framing shapes decisions. If you describe an outcome as a gain, the mind responds one way. If you describe the same outcome as a loss, the mind responds another. The numbers may be identical, but the feeling is different. This is because losses feel heavier than gains. The mind leans away from what it fears losing, and language can quietly determine what the mind believes is at stake. You might notice this in your own inner talk. I have to do this feels different than I get to do this. I failed feels different than I learned. They don't like me feels different than I don't know what they felt. The frame is the window through which the mind sees, and windows tint the light. Tonight, we can use framing not as manipulation, but as kindness, especially with ourselves. If a thought comes in a harsh frame, you can adjust it gently the way you might pull a curtain to soften a bright street lamp. You're not lying. You're choosing a tone that allows the nervous system to settle. For bedtime, the kindest frame is often the simplest. Not now. Not now. I don't have to solve this. Not now. I don't have to decide. Not now. I don't have to replay. The frame becomes a boundary, and boundaries create calm. Let that boundary be supported by breathing in and out, slow and steady, like a door closing softly, not slammed. You can feel how the body responds to the message that the night is not for fixing. Kahneman's work shows that the mind is sensitive to context, sensitive to emphasis, sensitive to what is highlighted. If you highlight danger, the mind tightens. If you highlight safety, the mind softens. If you highlight uncertainty as threat, the mind becomes restless. If you highlight uncertainty as normal, the mind loosens its grip. So tonight, we highlight what is safe and ordinary. You are here, you are resting, and you do not have to interpret every thought as urgent. You can let the frame widen until it becomes simply this: a quiet room, a steady breath, a body allowed to be heavy. And as the frame softens, the mind no longer has to brace. It can float, it can fade, it can become a gentle blur at the edges, making space for sleep to arrive unannounced and welcomed. There is a kindness hidden inside the mind's shortcuts. When people hear the word shortcut, they sometimes imagine something sloppy, a corner cut, a standard lowered. But Kahneman saw something more tender. He saw a mind that is trying to conserve its strength, a mind that has to move through thousands of moments each day and cannot afford to examine each one under a microscope. So it uses heuristics, simple rules that usually work well enough. The mind asks, does this feel familiar? Does this feel safe? Does this person seem trustworthy? Does this situation resemble another one I've seen? These quick questions are not signs of weakness. They are signs of survival. They are how you cross a crowded day without collapsing under the weight of endless analysis. The trouble is not that shortcuts exist. The trouble is that we forget they are shortcuts. We treat them as truth when they are only guesses that happen quickly. Tonight, you can hold both ideas at once. Your mind is doing its best, and your mind can sometimes mislead you. This is not a contradiction. It is the human condition. If you like, imagine your mind as a small sailboat on open water. The fast current is the wind, quick, practical, sometimes strong. The slow rhythm is the hand on the tiller, steady, intentional, able to correct course. You need both. Wind without steering is chaos. Steering without wind is exhaustion. So the skill we're practicing isn't turn off the wind. The skill is noticing when the wind has taken over, noticing when you're being pushed by confidence, pulled by vivid stories, nudged by framing, hurried by habit, and then, gently, you bring the hand back to the tiller. A quiet way to do this in life is to pause at the edge of a decision and ask a soft question. Not a harsh interrogation, just one small check-in. What am I assuming? What would I think if I had slept well? What would I advise a friend? The slower rhythm doesn't need a lot of time to help. Sometimes it only needs a doorway. Tonight, the doorway can be breath, in and out, slow and steady, as though you're giving the slower mind time to arrive without rushing it. You're not forcing anything. You're simply creating a pause wide enough for clarity to step in. Kahneman's work becomes gentlest here. It's not about judging your mind for taking shortcuts. It's about honoring why the shortcuts exist while remembering that they are not the whole story. So, if you notice a thought tonight that feels automatic, an old conclusion, a familiar worry, a quick self-criticism, you can meet it with a calm sentence. That's my shortcut speaking, and then you can soften. You can let the thought be present without letting it drive. You can return to the body, to the quiet weight of the blanket, to the steady ease of breathing. Because there is no exam tonight, no decision you must perfect, only the gentle art of noticing and letting the mind, little by little, become quiet enough for sleep. Now we step into a place where the mind often grows tense without realizing it. The feeling of loss. Loss has a particular weight, a particular gravity. The mind reacts to losing something as if the world has tilted, even when the thing lost is small. A few minutes, a small opportunity, a bit of money, a little pride. Even the imagined possibility of loss can tighten the chest. Kahneman observed that losses tend to feel larger than gains. In plain language, it often hurts more to lose 20 than it feels good to gain 20. The mind treats loss like a louder signal, and it responds quickly, protecting, guarding, pulling back. This helped explain something many people have felt but rarely named: why we sometimes cling to what we have even when change might help us, why we avoid choices that feel risky even when the risk is reasonable, why we might hold onto a story or a belief or a habit simply because letting go feels like losing. Tonight, we can hold this gently without turning it into a lesson in courage. The goal is not to become fearless. The goal is to become tender with the nervous system that is trying to protect you. Because sometimes the mind confuses comfort with safety. It chooses the familiar not because it is best, but because it is known, and the unknown feels like a loss of control. If you've been feeling restless lately, you might notice how often the mind frames things as potential losses. What if I mess up? What if I miss something? What if it goes wrong? These are not bad questions. They are protective questions, but they can become heavy if they fill the whole room. So here is a bedtime reframing, simple and soft. Tonight, nothing needs to be gained and nothing needs to be protected. The night is not asking you to win. It is asking you to rest. Let a slow breath confirm that, in and out, as though you're letting the body unclench its fists. You might imagine placing your worries into a small bowl beside the bed, not throwing them away, just setting them down. The mind can pick them up in the morning if it wants. Tonight, the hands are empty. Kahneman's insight about loss is not meant to make you suspicious of yourself. It's meant to make you compassionate, to realize that the tightness you feel around certain thoughts may be the mind's ancient habit of guarding what it values. So offer it reassurance, not through argument, but through sensation, through warmth, through a slower exhale, through the steady message that this moment is safe. And as safety becomes more believable, the mind loosens its grip. Loss stops shouting. Gain stops seducing. The river of thought slows, and you drift, not toward a decision, but toward quiet. There is a moment when the slower rhythm of the mind feels like a lantern being lit. It doesn't blaze. It doesn't flood the whole room. It simply makes a small circle of clarity, enough to see what is nearest, enough to take one careful step. Kahneman's work can sound like a map of all the ways the mind can be fooled, but beneath it is something kinder, a suggestion that awareness is not heavy. Awareness can be gentle. You don't have to become hyper-vigilant, suspicious of every thought. You only have to learn the feel of a pause. A pause is where choice lives. In the day, the pause might be a breath before you reply. It might be a second glance before you decide. It might be the quiet question, am I reacting or responding? The pause lets the slow mind enter the room. But tonight, the pause has a different purpose. Tonight, the pause is not for better decisions. Tonight, the pause is for softness, because the fast current can keep you awake with its quick stories. It offers predictions. It rehearses conversations. It scrolls through memories as if searching for something it forgot to do. It tries to make the world complete. The slow rhythm can help by saying, "We don't need completeness tonight." You might try a small practice now, one that fits the edges of sleep. As you listen, notice a thought that wants to pull you outward, into tomorrow, into yesterday, into some imagined conversation. Don't push it away. Simply label it gently as a thought, not a problem, not a warning, just a thought. Then breathe in and out, as though the breath is a soft hand smoothing a sheet. This is the lantern. Not a dramatic insight, but a quiet shift. The recognition that thoughts are events in the mind, not commands. Kahneman would say that the fast current produces impressions and feelings, and those impressions often feel like reality. The slow rhythm can examine them, but tonight, examination is optional. The gentlest version of slow thinking is simply noticing, noticing and letting go. You can imagine your mind as a night sky. Thoughts are passing clouds. Some are thin and harmless. Some are darker and denser. None of them are the sky itself. The sky remains. So tonight, remain. Remain with the steady things, the weight of your body, the softness of the pillow, the quiet air moving in and out. If it helps, lengthen the exhale slightly, as though you're telling the nervous system, it's okay to stand down. And if the mind insists on a story, let it be a small one, a lantern in a calm room, a breath in a quiet chest, a body allowed to rest. The lantern does not need to illuminate your whole life. It only needs to light the next gentle step, which tonight is simply drifting deeper into stillness. As we near the end of our walk, it can be comforting to gather the pieces without forcing them into a perfect summary. We've met the fast current of the mind, the quick pattern finder, the storyteller, the one that supplies answers before questions are finished. We've met the slower rhythm, the deliberate, effortful part of you that can pause, reconsider, and choose. We've seen how ease can masquerade as truth, how vivid stories can feel more common than they are, how small samples can look like fate, how framing can tint the light, how losses can feel heavier than gains. And through all of it, one message stays gentle. You are not broken. Your mind is not failing. Your mind is doing what minds do. Kahneman's gift was to make this visible, not to create anxiety, but to create understanding. When you understand a habit, you can hold it more lightly. You stop fighting yourself. You start listening. Tonight, the most useful listening is to the body. Because the body does not need a theory to relax. It responds to simple signals, slower breathing, softened muscles, dim light, safety. So, if you want to take something practical from this story without turning bedtime into work, let it be this. When the mind becomes loud, return to what is quiet. Return to the breath, in and out. steady as a tide. Return to sensation, the weight of your legs, the looseness of your hands, the calm temperature of the room. Return to the permission to not know. Sometimes people believe that sleep comes only when the mind is satisfied, when everything is solved, when every thought has been processed. But many nights, sleep comes the opposite way. Sleep comes when you stop trying to satisfy the mind. Sleep comes when you let the mind remain a little hungry for answers and you feed the body comfort instead. So you might imagine the mind as a child asking questions after the lights are out. You don't scold it. You don't lecture it. You simply say softly, "Those are good questions. We can talk tomorrow." And then you breathe. Kahneman taught that the mind is always producing impressions. Tonight, you can let those impressions float by like lanterns on water. You don't have to chase them downstream. You can watch them drift and watch your own breathing drift with them. If there's a single feeling to carry into sleep, let it be gentle humility. Not the heavy kind that doubts everything, but the soft kind that says, "I don't have to be certain to be safe." Your mind can be quick and brilliant and imperfect, and still you can rest. The world can remain unfinished. The night will hold you anyway. Now, as the room grows quieter and the edges of thought begin to blur, we can let the story fade the way a candle fades, slowly, kindly, without a sudden end. If your mind is still moving, that's all right. Minds move. They scan, they narrate, they rehearse, they predict. They do it the way the ocean makes waves, by nature, not by choice. And yet, even the ocean settles into long, calm swells at night. So give yourself permission to stop steering. Let the fast current slow. Let the slow rhythm rest. You don't have to force anything. You only have to allow. Allow the bed to hold you. Allow the breath to become simpler, in and out, a little slower than before, as though each exhale is setting a small weight down. If a thought arrives with urgency, you can meet it with the gentlest response. "Not now. Not now. I don't have to solve you. Not now. I don't have to finish you. Not now. I can let you wait." Imagine your thoughts as pages in a book that can be closed without being read tonight. The bookmark can stay. The story will still be there tomorrow. And now, return to the experiencing self, the one that feels, not evaluates. Feel the softness beneath your head. Feel the quiet heaviness of your body sinking into rest. Notice the calm space between sounds. This is enough. The mind may still try to craft certainty, to pull patterns from darkness, to tell vivid stories. But you can let those habits drift into the background, like a radio turned low in another room. What stays close is the simple rhythm that has always known how to guide you into sleep. Breath, heartbeat, warmth, stillness, in and out, slow and easy, as though the night itself is breathing with you. And as the last of our lantern light dims, remember this. Understanding the mind is not meant to make you vigilant. It is meant to make you kinder. Kinder to your quick judgments, kinder to your worries, kinder to your imperfect certainty. Tonight, you are allowed to rest without answers. Good night.